All right, good morning, good afternoon, perhaps, good evening, students. Welcome, and we continue down the road of our Enlightenment philosophers, right? So remember, guys, as we're going through this stuff, I want you to understand how what these philosophers advocated for, what they were saying, what they're hoping to achieve, basically was sort of the catalyst for both the American and the French revolutions, which dramatically changed the world and how we view government. That's why these guys are so darn important. So who we're going to speak about today, because we've already gone through Hobbes, we've gone through Locke, we've gone through Montesquieu, and we've gone through Rousseau, we're going to talk about Voltaire. And this one will be quick. And I'll be honest, you're not going to see a whole lot of Voltaire on your diploma exam, right? But I still find that he is an interesting cat just for the fact that he was so outspoken against the French monarchy. There's one quote in particular that I think you can use from Voltaire, which is very powerful as far as how liberal states should work. And remember, liberal in this case, we're talking this orientation towards freedom, right? So let's move on here, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so that's Voltaire, okay? Now, just so you're aware, the name Voltaire, and you can Google it, this name that he used was actually a pseudonym. It was a pen name, okay? Because the things that he was writing were so controversial, and they made the French monarchy so angry that what he was saying could literally wind him up in prison, and in fact numerous times he was in prison for what he said, or he could be severely punished or executed for what he said, okay? So this guy, I mean, when I think of Voltaire and the things that he wrote and how the biting satire and the attacks that he had on the French monarchy and the excesses of the French crown. I mean, this guy was like Tupac. You know what I mean? This guy was like, you know, I don't know if you know this rapper or not. His name's Immortal Technique. Like the wit and the biting nature of his writing, of his prose, was something to behold back in the day. So Voltaire here says government restricts our freedoms. And of course, he's talking about classical conservative government. So Voltaire is another classical liberal philosopher, and we'll see that here in a second. So he advocated for freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of politics, and freedom of religion. He, in fact, quite detested religion, but he nonetheless, as a liberal thinker focused on freedom, he believed that people had the right to choose their religion. So just because he didn't like something didn't mean that he believed he had the right to impose on anybody else, saying that they can't believe something, they can't say something, they can't think something, they can't believe something, right? Which is why I admire Voltaire and his liberal nature. All right, the book that he wrote, one of many, he wrote a novel called Candide. And in this book, guys, it was basically a scathing rebuke or refutation, or basically sort of like a diss, right, to use a lack of a better term, of the way French society was organized in the early 1700s. Now remember, early 1700s, we haven't had the French Revolution yet, right? We still had first, second, third estate. We still had immense amounts of poverty amongst the third estate. We still had huge amounts of economic injustice amongst the third estate. And of course, the first estate and second estate in France were the ones basically controlling everything in that country. So Voltaire was highly critical of that in this book. So he used satire to mock the French crown. Lots of sarcasm in his writings. He was imprisoned in the Bastille. I don't know if you remember the Bastille from Social 20, but the Bastille was that prison in the center of Paris, which on July 14th, 1789, called Bastille Day, that's the prison that the Third Estate attacked and tore it down brick by brick. So he attacked the French government, he attacked the Catholic Church, the French government being the second estate, right? Or sorry, the French crown being the second estate, and then the Catholic Church being the first estate. So and his books were outlawed, even burned by French authorities. Again, this guy was like an underground OG. He was no joke. And I would argue, guys, and it's this right here. It's this quote. Sorry, let me just move this. It's this quote that Voltaire gives us, that, man, if I was a student in Social 30 and there was anything to do with freedoms and how in a liberal society, you know, we have to tolerate what otherwise might seem intolerable to us. It's this quote where he says, "I do not agree with a word you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." So Voltaire, being this liberally minded individual in the classical sense, of course, he recognized that, you know, society is sort of a compromise, right? To live in a society that embraces freedom, it's a compromise because ultimately, I mean, if people are truly free, then they will do things which we may not like. But what gives you as an individual the right to impose on the rights of somebody else, right? Like maybe, you know, you don't like rap music. I happen to like rap music a lot, actually. I know you look at me and you're like, really? I was a young man growing up in the city of Edmonton in an area called Mill Woods, and I was exposed to sort of the political side of rap music back in the day with like Public Enemy and NWA and other things like that. And it really got me politically sort of engaged and motivated and understanding injustice and things like that, right? So I remember back in the day, people were outraged with what NWA was saying in their first record, Straight Outta Compton, right? You can Google the track listing of it, and there was one song in particular that people were outraged about. The whole album was pretty outrageous at that time, but just because someone doesn't like what they have to say doesn't mean that you have the right to shut it down. In a true and free society that embraces liberal ideals, you just have to deal with it. And really, guys, what it comes down to is if you don't like it, don't listen. You know what I mean? It boggles my mind how, you know, people think that, you know, we in society today have all these rules, all these laws that just continually erode and diminish our freedom, such as, you know, like vaping laws and things like that, right? Like, I'm not saying young people should do it, but now the government's trying to pass laws against people when it comes to like adults vaping and stuff, and certain flavors aren't allowed. Smoking, again, I'm no fan of those kinds of activities, but I recognize that in a free society, truly, in a free society, people are free to do damage to themselves if they want through consumption of things like alcohol, cigarettes, vaping, drugs, whatever it happens to be. I don't think it's a good choice, but do I, as an individual, have the right to impose on that other person who has freedom as well, right? So something to think about. Anyways, guys, that's Voltaire, right? That's it. So anyways, yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Do some Googling, check out YouTube, and see what you see about Voltaire. And then, yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. All right, guys, peace, love you as always, and we'll talk to you later.